The ninth season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.
Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Hello everyone, I'm Andrea McMaster and thanks for joining us for this week's edition of Consider This. Well, dream big. What should happen when it comes to preserving old neighborhoods and creating new ones? You do have a say, and this week on Consider This, we're going to talk about taking action to improve our neighborhoods. If you live in Omaha, you may have heard the name Super Neighborhood, this concept thrown around. It's really a new step in city planning, one that gives communities more of a voice. But even if you don't live in Omaha, you will want to listen up because we're going to talk about how this could be adopted or adapted for other communities in our state. We have three guests today with us on Consider This. Our first guest is Connie Spellman. She's the director of Omaha by Design. We're also joined by Ron Abdush, the executive director of the Neighborhoods Center for Greater Omaha. Right. And also David Drews, who is UNO's College of Public Affairs and Community Service, the Center for Public Affairs Research here for the state that's housed at UNO. Right. So thank you, all three of you, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, first off, the names of your titles are so long. I'm going to need you to explain a little bit about what you're representing, the organization, the group you're representing, and what you do. So, Connie, tell me a little bit about Omaha by Design. How is the group formed and what's the goal?
Well, Omaha by Design is a nonprofit organization that was initiated from the Omaha Community Foundation. In the late 90s, they were trying to figure out from their donors how they could provide better services. And what they discovered is that their donors were really very much interested in how the city looked, how it felt, that there were lots of projects that were here, but they would go to other cities and they would see vibrant areas, and they said, how can we make Omaha more vibrant, connected, distinctive? And Omaha by Design was the result of that. It really is an organization that is designed to promote public spaces. I think we've seen a bit of what that can look like by just viewing the riverfront and downtown and the transformation that's possible from an area that was not considered very attractive or vibrant or connected. And in actually 7 short years, it's really transformed itself. Omaha by Design thinks the city can transform itself. And we have worked always in partnership, public and private, to try to achieve that goal. And it was in 2004 that we really got started in a major way to create a comprehensive urban design plan for the city of Omaha. No other city the size of Omaha has ever attempted such an effort. And we were able to accomplish it thanks to partnering with the mayor's office, the planning department, and the input of hundreds of citizens to say, what is it that we want that makes our city attractive and livable, not only for the residents who live here, but for those who come. And so that's what we have been doing now we're into our 5th year, and we're very excited about the progress that's already being made, particularly in regard to neighborhoods.
And we're going to go more in depth of how that actually works, because the whole concept is we do have dreams, we do have ideas of how we want our neighborhoods, exactly, our cities to improve, and it can happen. There are steps that can be taken. Exactly. So, Ron, I want you to tell us a little bit about what the Neighborhood Center for Greater Omaha is and the purpose for that center.
Sure. A group of community leaders in 2001 saw the rise of neighborhood associations coming along, so they felt very strongly that there needed to be a central place for neighborhood associations to gather information, to have resources, education, and training. So the Neighborhood Center was established, and our mission is to build capacity and strengthen neighborhoods in Douglas, Sarpy, and Pottawatomie County. So we're engaged in education, we're engaged in technology support, we're engaged in research. We help neighborhood associations get established from their baby steps. As they mature and grow, we're there to support them all the way along with whatever resources they might need. We do not advocate for individual neighborhood issues, but we are advocates for the concept of neighborhood associations. And what we're seeing is that neighborhood associations today are very well organized, and they are exerting their muscle and making a difference in the community, which is very, very positive.
And I know you talk to David, who's sitting right next to you, quite often for information.
I do.
And David, tell us of what you do as providing information, being the lead data center in the state.
Yeah, our office, the Center for Public Affairs Research, housed here at UNO, is the lead agency for the state data center system, which is part of the Census Bureau. And every state has a lead agency that helps to get information to the public, usually census data, but things that businesses and neighborhoods can use to help make informed decisions. So that's our primary purpose. We also do economic research and some other community-based surveys, but one of our big items to complete is getting the appropriate information to the appropriate individuals and groups so that the best decisions can be made.
Okay. Well, let's talk now, going back to what you introduced us to, Connie, and talking a little bit about the urban development and the super neighborhoods concept that we've heard. If you do live in Omaha, you might have heard that there are 15 alliances.
Correct.
And the first alliance that you've devoted the time and the resources to is the Benson Alliance. Tell us a little bit about this process and what's going on in creating this alliance and creating a better Benson.
Great. Well, the comprehensive design plan that I spoke about resulted in a new urban design element for the City of Omaha master plan. And so one of the components of that master plan talked about neighborhoods. The whole section is neighborhoods. We prioritized, because we'd like to implement everything that's in the urban design element, but we prioritized and said the alliance, neighborhood alliance concept is one that's really important for the whole city and can be a model for other places throughout the state. And so we went to the mayor and the planning department and said, can we work together, just as we did in creating the plan, to create a model alliance to see and show people how it can actually work. Well, we realized, as we all know, that the city has limited resources. And so Omaha by Design said, well, let's get together and see how we can make this one very successful and show that it can, by bringing together other partners, make this work more easily. So that's when Omaha, they said, great, let's do it. Benson is our first one. And so I said, okay, what are the resources that are locally that we can bring together to help make this happen? And the first one we thought about was the Neighborhood Center for Greater Omaha, because a neighborhood alliance is an interim planning step between a comprehensive community plan and an individual neighborhood association. It takes a group of individual associations, businesses, churches, religious institutions, educational institutions within a broader geographic area to have them have a greater voice in their own support. And so we said, let's get the neighborhood center, because we knew that there were at least 7 or 8 neighborhood associations within that. We said, we also need demographic data. How do we really know what's here? How do we manage that information? So we called UNO. And David said, we'd be delighted to be a part. So in combination with the planning department, UNO, the Neighborhood Center, and Omaha by Design, we're working on this first alliance. And it's a very exciting process. We've learned a lot, but the 2 things I wanted to say, and then we can kind of add on here, is we knew that it was important to have a neighborhood plan. That's important. But we also knew that the first time out of the box, you better have a model process that you can replicate and keep repeating in the other 14 areas. And so this was kind of a dual purpose for this Benson Alliance. So they're the lucky to be first and sort of a guinea pig to be second on the second point. But we've learned a lot by treating it as a model process, so that the next ones will go much more smoothly. We'll know what to do, we'll be better prepared. Not that we're not prepared for this one, but we're just learning along the way. So that's kind of the background of what we're trying to do, is to say, let's get a model that can be replicated, and let's get a consultant that can come in, that can manage and lead the process to show what is the art of the possible in an area this big. It's interesting to note that the size of the Benson Alliance is the size of Grand Island, to give your viewers an idea of the scope of this. It's a large geographic area. So when you're thinking about planning for a city the size of Grand Island, you can imagine the complications that exist just to get the communication issues out. And we learned a lot, and I think it might be interesting to have Ron talk about some of the learnings that we've done.
Sure. Well, too, you've sought a lot of public input. This is not just officials working on this, and I want to point that out too. You really have been going to the public and saying, okay, let's dream. Let's dream. What do you want for your neighborhood? Let's throw it all out there. Let's brainstorm. And yes, you might say, we can't do everything. We can't do that all, but then let's prioritize. And that's what you've been doing with the Alliance as well in stepping through.
Right, and I failed to mention, we got together the planning team. But the planning team is just that. They are guides, they're consultants, and the most important group is the advisory committee that's made up of all the sectors of that alliance. And if we didn't have them, this would not be successful. One, it wouldn't get off the ground, and two, it would die on the vine because it would be a report that would sit on a shelf because it's not coming from the people.
Right.
So absolutely, Andrew, that's the bottom line.
And some of the beginnings of this then, David, was doing some of the demographic studies and some of the research. So talk about how that's done. Why is that critical to start there?
Okay, well, the first thing we needed to do in order to get an idea of the scope of the neighborhood was to have it kind of defined geographically. And so we got together and said, well, kind of what's the shape or what's the area that will fit into this Benson Alliance type area. So once we had those boundaries, which were basically 4 of the major streets in the area, we were able to go in and look at the exact blocks and how many people lived there and what were some of the characteristics of the housing and demographic information of the people living there. So when Connie mentions that that's about the size of Grand Island, that came from our numbers that calculated and summed up all the people living in those blocks inside of the Alliance area. So it would be about the 5th largest city in the state if it was taken as a standalone place. So once we had those boundaries defined, again, we can pull all that information and start asking some of the questions of, well, you know, what's important to know based on, you know, the information that we find, you know, the age characteristics, education, income, and poverty, and things like this that might be driving some of the overall issues in the area, you know, that might be on people's minds concerning them, and as they dream, that those things that might need to be addressed as they move forward. So.
And sure, and does the economic role, or I guess the income of the people in that community, does that play a role too?
Well, I think it might play into just the feel of the neighborhood. The Benson Ames area is very diverse, you know, and all of those things can be strengths for the area, and it needs to be looked at as far as how those patterns change and how that might make the neighborhoods therefore change, and trying to bring everybody together to form this super alliance.
Okay. So you mentioned why knowing the demographics is good, but also I want to point out that this is not just something, even though you're housed in Omaha, this is not just something that is for the city of Omaha. It is statewide, and you do get calls from communities who are wondering and inquiring about information.
Exactly. The census information that we have is for throughout the state, down to the block level for any community, and obviously some are larger than others, so there might be more of a push for neighborhoods in some of the medium-sized cities across the state. And it's all the same information. We have the software that can be used quickly to get a 4-page profile of all the different characteristics that are there in that area, such as incomes, education, unemployment, and things like that really drive a community.
Ron, when you talk about people wanting to improve their neighborhoods, what's at the top of their priority list? Or I guess there might be a couple of elements, but can you go through some of that with us?
Generally, I think a lot of people think that crime is really at the top of the list in a lot of neighborhoods, and surprisingly, that's down the list a ways. A lot of what concerns folks today are code enforcement issues at the top of the list. I'd put making sure that the housing stock in the area is up to code, and that it has the right curb appeal and things like that. Secondly, a big concern of neighborhoods is, believe it or not, parked cars or abandoned cars. Probably right next to that are animal control issues. It's a huge issue in some neighborhoods, and then probably right in that area, then you'll probably find the crime and drug activity and so on, which is, of those reasons alone, are several of which drive neighborhoods to get organized and form a neighborhood association in the first place to try to combat that problem.
Well, I guess you can't really ask a question of what makes a good neighborhood, because that would be individualistic. Everybody would have a different idea of what that looks like. But in Omaha is very unique. I'm sure every city is this way. And the fact that so many different communities within the city are unique and carry a character of their own. And really that's something that you're trying to develop in doing this too, is making it a place that they would go and think of. I think of Benson like this, and I see Benson this way.
And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do through the planning process, because even though it's a city within a city, the issues that are there are applicable to every place else. They may just maybe a little bit more unique. But transportation, the corridors, how do you get from one place to the other, are very important issues. That connectivity is critical, not only for the automobile, but for the pedestrian, because we all want to be able to walk from one place to the other. And so transportation is one issue that is common and what we're looking at. The other place is the housing issues. The Benson Ames Alliance is called, has lots of concerns with housing. It's got great stable housing, but they don't have a lot of variety or diversity in housing types. They don't have a lot of townhouses or row houses or houses for single people or young to want to come in for their starter house. So that's an issue that I think is really universal to a lot of other places, just your housing type and stock and variety and age and conditions. The other one that we're really looking at is the commercial. You know, we've had a city, and some others do too, where strip malls have sort of become prevalent, and you can't support all the strip malls. And so how do you condense and make viable the commercial entities within an area? Obviously in Benson, the downtown Maple, the old historic Benson, is just central. But then you look at 72nd Street and you see a big regional shopping center going up on 72nd and Sorensen. So again, there's a whole variety of interest issues that need to be addressed. And I think one of the last is looking at that whole issue of gateways and what makes it unique, what makes Benson more unique from other parts of the city, or what community makes it unique that they can use to focus economic development and tourism. So those are the kinds of issues that are really common to most cities that need to be kind of singled out, talked about, and then brought all together to make a real plan that works.
I think one real interesting point that you brought up was this issue of identity. And that's one of the probably the first learnings that we had in the Benson community, was that sense of identity. And very early what we found out was that not everyone within this alliance area, which David mentioned is rather large, from Fontenelle Boulevard to 72nd Western to Sorensen Parkway, there are folks in there that don't consider themselves part of Benson. And so I'm sure this will be something that we'll encounter as we go through the rest of the alliances, is what is the true identity of that alliance area? What do people feel is something that they can identify with? So during the process we learned that there are folks that, particularly north of Ames, that don't feel connected to Benson, and vice versa. So we changed the name to the Benson Ames Alliance because we wanted to be much more inclusive of everybody in the area. So that identity piece is really critical to moving an alliance forward.
Well, I think that's important too. We think back to the days of Donna Reed, I don't know, but where neighborhoods were so, they really did have an identity, and we counted on our next door neighbor, and we knew that the grocery store was a block away and that we could send our son down to the grocery store to get some candy or whatnot. But so creating an identity for people to say, yes, I belong to this neighborhood. Are you finding that that is important for individuals?
I think it's, from the work that I do, I think it's extremely important. And what's really gratifying to me is that what I've seen in the past year is that that neighborhood identity was so important, and they were taking care of issues that were in their backyard. But what we're seeing now is that they're concerned about what's happening in someone else's backyard, because there's just a matter of time before it hits their backyard. So we're really creating a whole sense of community by melding all this together, and people are caring about what happens to each other all over the city, and I think that's very, very powerful.
Yes, this concept of an alliance or a conglomerate of several neighborhood associations in partnership with businesses and culture and civic institutions is something that was started back in the 1980s, actually, in Omaha, and just really didn't get off of the ground. The concept was good. They didn't have the larger comprehensive plan to kind of place it in context with. And so the timing of this has been really important, because what it does is that, like Ron was saying, it gives power to the people to really work together to improve their geographic area. Collectively, the voice that they have to the city for certain resources, to granting institutions for resources, having a plan and having a coordinated body working towards it just gives more ability to attract developers, to really have a sense that this is a city that cares about itself, a neighborhood that cares about itself, and can make a real difference. And that's why I think some of our donors, for example, NYFA is very interested in this, because they can see that this is something that could be replicated throughout the state. The Allegiant Community Benefit Trust is something that is also interested, because they see the walkability, the health impacts that this kind of an institution makes that can help them better serve their clients throughout the city and the state. So there's a lot of benefit for the residents as well as for institutions to get to this level of planning. But it all gets back to the participation of the people living there, who really say, this is what we want, we believe in it, and we can rally around it once the planning's over.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So we have the planning stages. You hear from the public. They say, this is what we'd like to see. Then the next step is the consultants or the architects drawing up plans and saying, this is what certain areas of the city could look like, or what's the next step, and when is it final? When are you done, or are you never done?
Well, I'll just do real quickly.
Okay. Okay.
The consultants did take all the input from the first series of sessions and did a draft plan, a draft comprehensive plan that talks about all those issues I discussed. We're bringing it back to the advisory committee in July. We're going to have another community input session in August, where we'll have the final draft version to keep getting input, refining, getting it closer to the ground. We started up here, and now we want to say, okay, here it is. So we need community input. As soon as that's finished in August and we really have the buy-in, then they'll take it back, take all of those ideas, and put it in a format where we'll take it this fall to the planning board for their approval, and then to the city council, so that this becomes a part of the master plan of the city of Omaha. From that point, then you can begin the implementation, and when we will identify in that process a couple of pilot projects to begin to make sure we've got something started. And then it's really going to be a lot up to the group of citizens that are going to be leading this in the future to really determine their priorities and the next steps.
Okay. Can you give us a couple of examples of what a community might do or to improve their neighborhood? What is the Benson Alliance doing? I don't know if you can release that yet, but some of the ideas.
Well, I think there are ideas about how you get more mixed housing uses, and this is where we're really depending a lot on the private sector. And there are some financing tools that can be used, and areas identified where it would be really appropriate. That area is so close to, how when we see the downtown moving, the new North Omaha downtown development, Benson is that first ring of cities that is just like most cities have seen this kind of burgeoning, so housing, commercial development, neighborhood associations now looking at with this plan how they can go to, there are 5 institutions that do grants. Neighborhood Center, the Community Foundation, the Mayor's Grants, the Kiewit Foundation, Mutual of Omaha, they can go together, write grants, and really do some gateways, some community gardens, some beautification efforts, some streetscape projects. There's just lots of things that can be done that begin to move the ball forward.
Well, let's pick up a little bit on that point, Ron. Neighborhood associations, why is that so important to have? Not all neighborhoods have neighborhood associations, I know, but a lot do.
They do, and the numbers increasing, but that participation at the neighborhood level, the support for whatever program or project or design that they might come up with is really critical to the success of that, and it's going to be up to the neighborhoods, neighborhood association leadership to continue to drive that process forward after Omaha by Design is finished with their work and it's part of the master plan. It's going to be up to the folks that are still there to continue to drive the process forward. So we'll be working very closely with those neighborhood associations to keep them organized, possibly form an alliance so that they have a little bit more clout and they're represented on whatever advisory board might come of this project in order to, keep the effort going forward. I think the other thing that I just wanted to mention real quick in this design is they're also looking at some additional green space that not a lot of people even recognize is there, and it's along Coal Creek. And some of the ideas that have come forward about developing some green space within the Benson Alliance area is very, very exciting too. So I'm kind of anxious to see how that all plays out as well.
Yeah, and I can add in onto that when we did our demographic study, we also took aside and did a sample and a survey of those residents living in the Benson-Ames area. And it came out that we had some questions on healthy lifestyle activities and how they could be improved, and they talked about improving the trail system and improving sidewalks and walkways in the area. And one of the ways they'll be able to do that is to implement it there at the Coal Creek area, where you might be able to walk along that area, and they'll have other linkages throughout the Alliance where there'll be like a little trail system and walkways that can help improve some healthy lifestyle activities.
Well, we only have a minute left here, so I'm just going to talk really the backbone of Omaha by Design, I know, is some of that, talking about the green space, forming a citywide park system, a complete trail system, landscaping highway edges, and encouraging landscape trees or streets, tree-lined streets. And other ideas, one that I think is really neat is the conservation of buildings. It's an old building. A lot of times we think we need to take that down, but you can preserve those old buildings, promoting public art, promoting walkable neighborhoods, which you've mentioned. Anything else you want to throw in there real quickly?
No, all I want to say is that everything that you just said that is citywide plays out in the Neighborhood Alliance. It's where all of those ideas are really brought together. And it's a perfect example and I think a good conclusion to say that all of those ideas are being tested in this Alliance area because that's what makes it important in a neighborhood.
Okay, thanks so much, Connie, Ron, and David for being with us today, and thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 9th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Sunday at 5 p.m.